Howdy! I'm in the Magic Cave. I've two-tone background, shit just got serious. I'd like to thank Paul C, one of my top patrons, for very generously bringing me to the Red Pill premiere and setting in motion the wheels of this little visit. I'd like to thank another enthusiast of mine for the honey badger figurine. It now takes pride of place in the cave, and also thank you for the bottle of honey, Jack. We had to drink it 2 days, and we did, right up until minutes before boarding the plane to Canada. It was most helpful. Also, I'd like to thank the crazy mofo who pledged $1,000 to my Patreon. This is the video you'll be paying for. Hope it's sufficient. As promised, you will be receiving this very hat as a reward. It stinks of tobacco at this point, I hope you don't mind. Alright, let us get on with the video.
Hi, I'm Miriam and this is Crash Course Human Geography.
Hi there, Crash Course. Hank, the various series you did on chemistry and biology were excellent. I would gladly recommend them to curious learning persons of any age. Likewise, John, your presentation of world history is as fun and compelling as it is informative. But Hank, as we all remember, this is where you fucked up.
Faggot. Faggot.
There's no excuse for using that word, Hank, because as we know...
Point of using a word like that is to harm. That's all it's used for. That is its sole purpose.
Shame on you, Hank. You can't possibly have used that word for the sake of being harmlessly and innocuously informative, because by your own admission that is not possible. You could only have used it maliciously. This makes you as bad, if not worse, than a gay man who would choose to call himself, for instance, a dangerous faggot. Also, consider what you say here. Right after the arguably offensive qualifier term, particularly.
Think of the word baby, used as a term of endearment among adults, particularly applied to women.
Yeah, women call men baby as well, both in song and beyond it. But you ignored that entire half of the issue to focus solely on women's fragility. I think your brother might have something to say about that.
Your weird worship of women is a kind of misogyny because you're imagining women as these beautiful, fragile things.
That, incidentally, was when John fucked up. As far as I can tell, thinking of women as beautiful and fragile is called gynophilia, if such a phenomenon even requires a term. I'd say misogyny, John, is perhaps more closely associated with thinking of women as ugly and insensitive. But since the only people who find women ugly are other women, and of course homosexual men, that won't do, will it, John? You need to be able to charge straight men with misogyny, no matter how much or how little they think of women. Except, of course, for your brother Hank, who by your own standards treats women misogynistically with ridiculous kid clubs and authoritarian language policing, but it's entirely for their own good, so it's okay. Needless to say, Hank and John, if you think of men as ugly and insensitive, what do you suppose that makes you? One possible word is misandrist. But if you prefer to think of misandry as a phenomenon that simply doesn't exist, then we'll go with the more popular explanation that you're simply straight men who believe in patriarchy theory. Perhaps one day, one of you will do a video about how patriarchy theory is bad science, but I'm not holding my breath. And when your new presenter, Miriam, did a video on what she perceives to be bad science, and you noticed it got 1,000 dislikes in the first day, I really hope your reaction wasn't, oh, well, they're all just misogynists. I really hope you're not just going with the Ghostbusters defense, otherwise known as the aggro defense, otherwise known as the Hillary defense. Because that, according to John Green, would make you just another kind of misogynist. Shall we continue?
And we're going to start this series with a little talk about how not to do human geography.
Isn't that strange? Isn't that anomalous for a crash course series? All the others focus mostly on what is established and verifiable, but this one comes straight in with here's the wrong way to do it.
I want to let you know up front that all the ideas we're talking about today are terrible ideas.
Do you see the problem? Imagining opening a textbook on evolution and all you see is page after page of this is why religion is stupid. Imagine if you opened a world atlas and all it told you is India is not here, Africa is not here, and Europe is a terrible, terrible place full of scientifically illiterate racists. Oh wait, that last one is actually what she's saying.
Mostly, we're going to look at and debunk a view of the world called environmental determinism, which some people call geographical determinism or climatic determinism.
What if you don't call it determinism? What if you simply call it the inclusive consideration of the anthropological effects of environment, geography, and climate?
Whatever you call it, though, it's bad science.
Okay then.
It's like online dating. You've got to look at a lot of bad profiles before you find love. And in this context, love equals the modern study of human geography.
I see from your graphics there that you've marked alchemy and phrenology as bad science. How do you feel about witchcraft? A few people know where I'm going with that, and they know what's going to come up later. This is going to be fun. The kind of cringy, mortifying fun in which I specialise. Welcome to the show. I hope you don't mind if I use your intro instead of mine. Thanks, Thought Bubble.
Basically, environmental determinism is the idea that the physical environment, like climate, landforms, vegetation, and soils, determines the character of cultures across the surface of the Earth.
Oh, well, it does. It's not the only thing that determines it, just like weather determines mood, but not weather alone. If your whole family was recently killed in a fire, then a little bit of drizzle probably isn't going to touch the sides of your emotional state. But all things being equal, most people would rather go outside in a spell of moderate sun than in a monsoon. Because monsoons tend to put people in a rather shitty mood. Unless you're the tail end of a dry spell, and you really want your crops to grow, in which case the rains will make you transcendently ecstatic. Either way, we are very much beholden to the sky caprice. By that I don't mean sky goat. Caprice means goat. The linguistic descendants of Latin are very nuanced systems, as I believe we're sort of determining. Here's a quick observation to illustrate what I mean. Hollywood. This is what Los Angeles looks like at midnight. Isn't it beautiful? It's like a cluster of galaxies across an endless nothingness. It's so beautiful. And here it is at 6 in the morning. As you can see, just an ugly mess of botanical mismatching. I might as well be in Bognor Bloody Regis. It's the transformation, folks. Ain't nature something? Speaking of Los Angeles, are you going to tell me, Miriam, that the aqueduct system that William Mulholland built to transport water all the way from the Colorado River to California was completely pointless? Would the people of Hollywood have exactly the same temperament and philosophy if they carried on getting their water from the nearest cactus?
This includes both specific cultural behaviors such as human temperament or personality, clothing styles, food habits, architectural forms, language, religious beliefs, as well as the course of civilization's history and its level of social and economic development.
Do you know where Babylon is? It used to be the luscious place on Earth. Yeah, at the dawn of the agricultural revolution, but it gradually got agricultivated to death. And now it's just another strip of Iraqi wasteland. But as far as the people from Babylon were concerned, this changed nothing, right? They were like, so what? There's no need to move on to southern Europe where it's still lush, because lushness has no bearing at all on the interests and priorities of human beings. I know we literally worship the sun and the rain due to their undeniable life-giving properties, but who the fuck cares, right? Jesus, I thought this would be one of those difficult videos, but I think it's just going to be one of those long ones.
This determinism...
Okay, Miriam, I have determined that many of your ideas are wrong, and I am determined to put them right. But that does not make me a determinist. Hank, mate, you know a lot about philosophy. You understand that determinism is not just the act of determining something. It is an all-encompassing philosophical position which postulates that everything is predetermined and that free will is just a complex illusion of living creatures. Shouldn't you have butted in and corrected Miriam when she referred to the study of the environmental effect on humans as determinism?
This determinism sees the interaction between the environment and humans as a one-way street. Humans are passive agents in a stimulus-response system.
It is a one-way system. The weather affects humans a great deal, but humans do not affect the weather. At least not until they discover industry and build large population centres which create smog and do have some peripheral effect on localised rain cycles and ground temperatures. The question of whether humans have affected not just the weather but the overall climate change is an extremely controversial one, which I won't get into. But it's safe to say that before the 19th century, it absolutely was a one-way street, in which humans were nothing but the subordinate bitches of Earth's highly temperamental atmosphere. For Earth's highly temperamental atmosphere, read the Old Testament's highly temperamental Sky Daddy. You know why the story of Noah's Ark exists? Because it's quite common for spacious coastal land plains to get flooded. Religions are created largely because of our interpretation of what the sky does. Again, that's not deterministic. It's not an ism. It is one of the ways in which people determine things. And the irony is that the tenets of those very religions often go on to have greater effects on humans than that of the environmental disasters they describe. So to reiterate, the natural environment has a very significant effect on human progress, but it is not the only thing that affects human progress. Have you actually found anyone who genuinely believes it is the only factor? Or are you just using that as a straw Zeus in order to insinuate that it has no effect at all? Or at least that the environment is nothing compared with the cultural hurricanes wreaked on humanity by the racial supremacy of white Europeans.
This theory has been very seductive over time because it's so intuitively simple, and people love straightforward explanations.
Yeah, I like patriarchy theory. Yeah, that's perhaps off topic, Miriam, but it'd be interesting to hear what you think of the theory that women have been oppressed and marginalised by their own men throughout all history. Hank and John seem to be quite fond of that theory, even though it's considerably less sound and more reductive than, for instance, the theory that organisms evolve according to environmental constraints. I mean, sure, maybe the reason humans are relaxed by the colour green is because plants are green, but isn't that just reductive? Shouldn't we take into consideration the possibility that God made them green to suit us? This is Hitch 101, Miriam, and you're not even there yet.
But to quote my friend John Green, truth resists simplicity. Environmental determinism is reductionism. It's an attempt to explain an extraordinarily complex phenomenon by reducing it to its simple elemental parts. Anyway, let's start with environmental determinism in ancient Europe.
Perchance will we be finishing in the same place that we start.
Before there were academic disciplines and universities, it was the job of philosophers to figure out how the world worked. Aristotle was one of many philosophers who attempted to make sense of the physical world and bring order to the human world.
Granted, Aristotle was mostly full of shit. Do you know why?
He built on the works of Hippocrates.
Bingo. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, but in Aristotle's day there weren't many giants.
And divided the world into 3 climate zones. In the tropics was the hot torrid zone, followed by the mid-latitude temperate zone, and finally the cold frigid zone of the polar regions.
This is accurate. For all the shit Aristotle got wrong, he was dead right about that, wasn't he? Which is pretty impressive, in a time when almost no one was able to visit all 3 regions and return to tell the tale in a lifetime.
Aristotle, being Greek, thought that the Greeks were pretty solid evidence that the temperate zone was obviously the best for turning out great people.
Did you just ad hominem Aristotle? You did, didn't you? Listen, if someone who lives on the equator tells me the equator is the best place to build a cosmological observatory, I would not respond by saying, oh yeah, you would say that, you live there. It stands to reason that somewhere on the Earth is likely to be the best place for a given something, and that some of the people who happen to live in that region will happen to figure it out. Let's ignore the fact that Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler and Newton were all European, and that very few of the civilizations developing anywhere near the equator figured any of this shit out. Let's try to figure out if Aristotle was right about this. Or at least, is this a predictive model? Where was democracy invented? Where was slavery first abolished? Where did the Industrial Revolution and the Technical Revolution and the space race all happen? If the answer to all of these questions is in the temperate zone, then I say we have some solid evidence that Aristotle was at the very least onto something.
Geographer Clarence Glacken once paraphrased Aristotle's theory like this: the peoples of the cold regions, including those living in Europe, are spirited but deficient in skill and intelligence. They preserve their liberty, but they lack political organization and are incapable of governing others.
Tell you what, let's take a quick walk outside, shall we? Welcome to the frozen prairies of the north. This is Calvington, in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan. That's the Badger Cave there. Hello to you. It's very quiet out here, very spacious, very sparsely populated, and bitterly cold. For most of the year, it's not a very good idea to go outside because the environment alone can kill you. Not because of tornadoes or earthquakes or the 1,000 species of poisonous reptile, but because the air itself can freeze your skin in a matter of minutes. I think what Aristotle was getting at is that spirit is an extremely important thing to have around here. More important than skill or intelligence. Skill and intelligence are important, but they are worth nothing unless you have an inner fire. If you go ahead and see what I mean there.
The peoples of Asia are the opposite. They are intelligent and inventive, but lack spirit and are in subjection and servitude.
Welcome to the doorway to the Tropic of Cancer. This is California. We're making our way from Beverly Hills to Venice Beach. It's very warm, even in October, very densely populated and very busy. Hordes of people migrate to this region every year in an attempt to achieve fame and fortune. As such, competition is extremely high, and spirit is simply not enough to ensure success. If you are to rise above the crowds here, you're going to need to be creative and adaptive and intelligent and inventive. Because if you don't have these things, then whatever spirit you do have will very probably be crushed horribly. Individuality is something that's very difficult to maintain in an environment like this. Hence, it's no surprise that servile collectivist ideologies develop here more aggressively than anywhere else. Needless to say, this goes several-fold for the people who live in tropical jungles. In such an environment, you're quite likely to get the idea that God really wants to fuck with you. And if you live all the way up in the Arctic Circle, you're more likely to get the idea that God just doesn't give a fuck.
The Greeks, living in the region intermediate between these extremes of hot and cold, enjoy the advantages of both. They are high-spirited and intelligent.
One could argue that this is no longer true of the Greeks. Yeah, the Greeks perhaps had a Helleноcentric view of Europe. It's like Romans had a Romocentric view of Europe, and perhaps the English have an Anglocentric view of Europe. But Aristotle's point was regarding the entire temperate region, including the Americas, even though he didn't know it existed.
As with pretty much everything Aristotle said, both the marginally correct stuff and the flat-out wrong stuff like this, it would be commonly accepted as truth about the world for around 2,000 years.
For the first 1,000 years after that, everyone in Europe slowly forgot that ancient Greeks ever existed. We call it the Dark Ages. Strangely enough, we have Muslims to thank for rediscovering the wisdom of ancient Europe. That's why we have terms like algebra and algorithm and alchemy. This sort of fucks up everyone's point, doesn't it? But then, over the most recent millennium, Islam kind of fucked up. And now most of the Middle East is a desert. But Europe remained lush and still is. Surprise, surprise, it has gone back to representing the global heart of innovation and individualism. It seems you can only ravage the African and Middle Eastern regions for so long before you permanently raise the ecosystem to the ground. But Europe is now riddled with steel and concrete cities, yet the greenery remains sustainable, and as a result the populace remains sustainable. This is probably, Miriam, because of the climate.
By the mid to late 1800s, we had universities, and the earth and life science departments were frantically churning out theoretically informed research, thanks in large part to Charles Darwin's theory of evolution.
You mean that beautifully simple theory that explains something incredibly complex? Are you sure that's not just a very reductive and deterministic, and dare I say Eurocentric approach? Is this just yet another coincidence that Darwin was a product of the temperate zone? Now, you fuck no, you carry on.
Ellen Churchill Semple was one of the most influential human geographers of that time. Semple studied under the German Friedrich Ratzel, a historical and political geographer who was trained as a zoologist and heavily influenced by Darwin. Ratzel spoke of the role of the natural environment in governing human migrations, using biological metaphors like living space or Lebensraum.
Oh, okay. Oh, not to pull the Godwin card, but holy fucking shit. Yeah, European philosophy led to Darwinism and secularism and humanitarianism, but those were just these things, you know, whatever. They were just blips. They were just the many exceptions that prove the rule. But National Socialism is the direct consequence of European philosophy. Really? Do you perhaps feel like mentioning Gongchanjui or Murungu or Jihad? No, those are good kinds of foreign words, because people from those continents would never dream of xenophobic imperialism. Jesus. Nigel Christ.
She wrote, "Man is a product of the earth's surface. This means not merely that he is child of the earth, dust of her dust, but that the earth has mothered him, set him task, directed his thought, confronted him with difficulties that have strengthened his body and sharpened his wits."
That's true. No matter how vacantly poetic and fluffy and strangely Gaian she's being when she says that, it is nevertheless true. Because human beings, Miriam, are not from Jupiter. They are all from Earth. Anything that has happened to humans has indeed happened as a direct result of living on Earth. Why are you presenting this as a statement that needs to be argued with?
She has entered into his bones and tissues, into his mind and soul.
This is true. It is verifiably true. Human beings really are made from material created on Earth. and indeed forged in the cause of exploding stars. Not only is this statement true, it isn't even Eurocentric. What the shit is wrong with you? What do you think human beings are made from? Do their bones and tissues get transported here from another fucking dimension?
Another prominent determinist was Ellsworth Huntington, who was a teacher and research associate at Yale beginning in 1907. He published books titled Civilization and Climate and The Character of Races. Huntington's environmental determinism was almost a throwback to Aristotle, as he applied these flawed theories to large-scale geographic regions in search of the relationship between climate cycles and civilizational development.
Oh my, that's quite damning, isn't it? The people of Europe and North America just happen to think of themselves as the healthiest and most energetic people, and they think of developing regions as the least healthy and energetic. I mean, they have no basis for this. It's scandalous. Okay, so let's look at the CEDAW map. Do you know what CEDAW is, Miriam? It's the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. This has been a global priority of the UN since 1979. As you can see, it is rather curiously a negative image of that health and energy map we just looked at, which nobody has taken seriously since the early 20th century. As far as the UN is concerned, Europe and North America are doing just fine. But those nasty little regions in Africa and the Middle East, well, something must be done. I'm sure this has nothing to do with anything. I mean, Syria is in there, and so is Saudi Arabia. But if anyone talks about one of those countries, we need only selectively pretend they're talking about the other. So you can call hypocrisy and hyperbole about something. After all, the overarching concept of the Muslim world only exists when it suits my needs. And my needs just happen to take the form of misogyny. You see, it's the law. It is the law that every woman must wear a hijab. It is also the law that every woman must wear a niqab. It is also the law that every woman must wear a burqa. And there's only one book of law, and everyone has to follow it to the letter in the same way. In short, la la la, none of this is happening. The UN doesn't do anything except tell the people what to do. And the people don't do anything except tell the government what to do. None of this is a relevant factor to anything. It's all because of the bad men who run those countries and the bad men who run these countries. Ordinary citizens like me didn't do nothing. Now let's go save my girlfriend from the clutches of the evil misogynists. I'm an MRA, me, a prominent one.
Or what was euphemistically called human progress.
Yeah, now shortened to the euphemism progress, which means the progress of female rights. See, human is no longer an issue, just female. But I'm totally a human rights activist. That's why I'll fuck over my favourite men's rights activists to appease the cuntish whinings of rich people in poor countries. Because more misogyny. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. You just say the right things. It's inexplicable.
If you haven't picked up on it already, all these ideas are super racist. They all boil down to the claim that only Europeans were capable of creating great civilizations.
Really? Because it kind of sounds like Europeans acknowledging that they have it easier. It sounds like Europeans doing that thing where they check their privilege. You're racist if you do, racist if you don't. But only if you're a European. There's totally nothing racist about that little philosophy.
Environmental determinism was short-lived in academic circles, but these bad ideas continue to be popular, especially among officials in charge of colonial governments.
Yes, as I believe I just demonstrated.
Environmental determinism turned out to be an ideal tool for the project of European imperialism. Eurocentric ideologies dressed up as scientific facts turned out to be really popular for justifying Euro meddling in Asia, Africa, and the world at large.
I think it's time to bring in the doomsday device, don't you? Hey Miriam, a couple of students in the UCT science facility have thought of a brilliant solution to your problem.
And my response to that was, if I personally were committed to enforcing decolonization, science as a whole is a product of Western modernity, and the whole thing should be scratched off.
Sadly, environmental determinism is still a thing today.
Especially in Africa. So if we want practical solutions to how to decolonize science, we'd have to restart science from, I don't know, an African perspective, from our perspective of how we've experienced science.
That seems like a good idea to me.
There's a place in KZN, and they believe that through the magic, the black magic, you call it black magic, they call it witchcraft, others, that you are able to send a lightning to strike someone.
But the claims that this can produce reliable scientific answers to these problems just isn't true.
So can you explain that scientifically? Because it is something that happens.
Native peoples in tropical climates were perceived as lazy, lacking in discipline, immoral, and quick-tempered. I suppose environmental determinism has always had this sciencey feeling.
By you doing that, you're disrespecting the sacredness of the space. And so I'd like to ask you to first please apologize to the panel directly.
That is bad science.
And then number two, understand the rules that we went by in the space. Because it's going to be very problematic. When we started, this is not an antagonizing space. And so what you're trying to do is collapse the space and make it antagonizing.
And that's not what we're going to do in this series.
Which we will not allow. This is a progressive space.
Or what was euphemistically called human progress.
For people to say their opinions. And we have noted how those opinions are going to be laid out. So I would like you to first apologize and then go on and agree to abiding by the rules of the space. Otherwise, I would, if you're not willing to do that, I'd please ask you to remove yourself from the space. But those are the rules of engagement of the space.
Thanks for watching.
I'd like to thank everyone. Yes, everyone. I've never encountered a person who didn't inspire me. Either to laughter with their gullible stupidity, or to joy with their intelligence and determination. And to summarize, yes, you can be determined without being a determinist. You can throw away the CEDAW map and concentrate inclusively on both genders. And you will get irrational torrents of nonsensical shit from the people you call your friends, and even the people who claim they love you. But determination and dedication will get you through it. You don't even need booze. I don't even need booze. I'm just weak. And I'm gonna die soon. That's why I do everything as though it's my last thing. I do every video as though it's my last video. Good night and good luck in case this is the one. I'll be in Edmonton on the 27th of October, participating in the screening and the Q&A of the Red Pill movie. Details in the low bar. For all my better judgment, I've found myself with important shit to do. And I think it's no coincidence that the only people who give me shit are the people with nothing better to do. When you run out of ideas to challenge your enemies, you have nothing left to do but attack your friends. It's what happens when you've lost track of which is which. But it'll all be okay. A year from now, we'll all be laughing. I know that's perhaps not the right thing to say, but I believe it. Life might not have improved for everyone, but at some point we'll find ourselves laughing. It's what keeps me going. For some unknown reason, no matter how shitty everything gets, something is going to make me smile. And it's far more important than the shit that makes me wince. So, thank you for making me smile. Once, twice, thrice upon a time. Goodbye. Fuck right. Especially if the way you've been fucking has worked just fine for you so far. Would that?